have no future. There is no future. There are going to be 2 hounds of Baskervilles, actually 2 Chihuahuas, who are going to go crazy, and they will not stop barking unless I go to the door. The lights are about to go down, and I hear this very familiar laugh behind me. I turn around. It's freaking Vincent Price. Wow. And before I can open my mouth, he says, "Sam, what are you doing here?"
Good evening, weirdos, and welcome to another edition of Livin' CRUDDY. I'm your host, the inimitable, handsome Jimmy, joined once again by Lord Gino Royd, the sexy Vinny Scrams, however you say the name there, I can't even remember. And of course, this week, our guest, writer, director, producer, actor, does it all, probably 30-degree Mason, Mr. Sam Irvin!
Hey, thank you, gentlemen, for having me. I'm glad to be here.
We're super stoked that you agreed to do this. You invite people in and sometimes you get no response or you get an immediate response. You were immediately on it. Appreciative of that.
No, I'm a big old fanboy, and I love doing podcasts and stuff. It's great fun.
That's awesome. Well, we try to have fun with it. I think we would consider ourselves horror nerds along those lines. Vinny and I are big into all the horror stuff, and it's broad. I mean, old stuff, new stuff. Jimmy's a little bit more of a sci-fi hound, but after what we've discovered after digging into some of your stuff, I feel like a total amateur.
I said, Gene, did you just pull something out of the library?
I did pull something out of the library, which was my reference book here. So,
Oh,
nice. Kind of what got us started down this road. These little Shop of Horrors books are very good, but this one in particular is probably the most dense with information of any of these type of publications I've ever seen. It's literally 30 books packed into one large magazine. It's got everything in there. I knew that people regarded Frankenstein The True Story as a favorite. I didn't quite know how much backstory and how broad and what big of a production that was. You just kind of assumed that a TV movie was something they had 2 weeks to make and jammed in as much as they could in that period. But there's so much more going on in that story than
no kidding. Yeah, my love affair with Frankenstein The True Story began in 1973 when it first aired in 2 parts on NBC on November 29th and December 1st. I was 17, and it just completely blew my mind. I was already a huge fan of Frankenstein movies. Bride of Frankenstein is and still will always be my favorite film of all time. And the Frankenstein, just the whole idea of a Frankenstein monster has always been very touching for me. As a kid, as a tiny kid, seeing Bride of Frankenstein on TV, I always cried for the monster and everything. It was always a very emotional thing for me. And as I got older, I also realized that as an outsider, as a closeted gay teen, as the kid who was bullied, whatever it was, I identified with this freak of nature who, through no fault of his own, was brought into this world and misunderstood by everybody and persecuted. And boy, could I identify with that. It just spoke to me. And when Frankenstein The True Story aired at 17, just as I'm going through coming of age and figuring out my sexuality and all these things, it just grabbed me by the throat and didn't let go. And it was incredibly emotional for me. I picked up on a lot of very subtle and perhaps not so subtle gay subtext in the film, which I wasn't sure I was reading into or if it was intentional. And I didn't quite know if it was intentional, how in the world they got it by the censors, because in 1973, homosexual acts was still illegal. It was still considered a mental illness. It was not something you saw treated on television very often, and especially in a kind of a sympathetic way. And man, it just, in so many ways, blew me away. So at that time, I was a huge monster movie fan. I was already deep into editing and publishing my own horror fanzine, and it was called Bizarre. And I did annual issues. I put them together during my summer break, and I decided I was coming up on Bizarre number 3 that would be published in the summer of 74, and I decided I have to put Frankenstein Frankenstein, The True Story on the cover, which is exactly what I did. None of the issues had a color cover up to this time, and I couldn't afford the printing for a full color, wraparound thing. Here's Christopher Lee from I, Monster on the back in black and white, as you can see. But I found an ad in Billboard magazine for a postcard company in New York that would print 1,000 color postcards for like $50, or I forget what it was, but it was something I could, kind of afford. So I had gotten from NBC or Universal that produced Frankenstein the True Story exclusive color slides, and I had this beautiful picture of Michael Sarrazin as the creature, and I sent that slide off to this company, and they printed up these postcards, and I personally glued every one of them to the cover of every issue of this magazine. Well, there's Michael Sarrazin again on the inside front cover from the movie as the creature. Then I did this whole spread on the movie. And then I also, as a graduation present, I got my parents to send me to London so I could interview people in person, like all my Hammer film idols, Christopher Lee, Peter Cushing, Ingrid Pitt. I also interviewed Diana Rigg from the Avengers, but also I interviewed Jane Seymour, who played Prima, the female creature in Frankenstein, The True Story. What took her out to dinner. It was this fancy restaurant. I ordered shrimp cocktail as an appetizer, and when it came, all the shrimp were intact. They had not been shelled, the eyes, everything. I didn't know what to do. So Jane Seymour taught me how to de-shell shrimp, and here she is with her knife, and she's like furiously going at it and stuff. Anyway, it was the most hilarious, just a great experience interviewing her, sweet as can be. And I interviewed Margaret Leighton, who played the French woman that meets the creature at the opera. Once they had Margaret Leighton, who was this incredible, great British character actress, they added another scene with her at the ball where she mistakenly thinks that it's a costume ball, and she shows up dressed as Little Bo Peep. And so she has this little comic relief moment later in the film. Anyway, I go to interview her. She's playing Miss Havisham in a TV production of Great Expectations with Michael York and James Mason and all these people. And I get to meet Michael York and watch them shoot the scene where her wedding dress catches on fire. It was all incredible. And then her husband in real life shows up at the end of the day to pick her up. And it's Michael Wilding, who also was in Frankenstein, The True Story. He played the father of Elizabeth. So anyway, it was just incredible. I just had this great passion and obsession with Frankenstein, The True Story from way back. Now, I was friends back then with, I had never met him in person, but we had become pen pals with another fanzine editor named Richard Clemenson, who edited and published a fanzine called Little Shop of Horrors. In fact, we started both of our fanzines the very same year in 1972. And so he had that issue, knew of my passion about that film. So flash forward about, 40 years, you do the math. He probably contacted me about 2014 or 15 and said, hey, listen, we use a cover artist a lot named Mark Maddox. Frankenstein, The True Story is one of his favorite films. He wants to paint a cover of that movie so bad, and he keeps badgering me to do an article or something in the magazine about it that would give him the excuse to be able to do a cover of Frankenstein, The True Story. And I know of your passion for it. Would you want to write an article about it? And I said, well, yes, but if I'm going to write about it, I want to do more than what I did in my fanzine way back then. I don't want to just repeat. I really want to do a deep dive. And would you let me do the entire issue devoted to this movie? To my great joy, Dick kind of gave me the keys to the castle and said, go for it. Normally, the magazine is 100 pages. By the time I got done with all my research and interviewing every living person who was still involved in that film, who was still around, we had to expand the issue to 120 pages. It has over 400 photographs that I dug up. It is a deep dive. And I interviewed Jane Seymour again, decades later. I interviewed David McCallum, who plays Dr. Clerval. I interviewed Leonard Whiting, who plays Dr. Frankenstein. I interviewed Nicola Paget, who plays Elizabeth. I interviewed Don Bacardi, who's the co-screenwriter with the late Christopher Isherwood. His partner, Don Bacardi, who's a world-famous portrait artist, co-wrote the screenplay with him. And he confirmed for sure that it very intentionally put all of the gay subtext into the script. And not only that, but the producer of the movie, Hunt Stromberg Jr., was also gay, and he was fanning the flames of this. And there were several other gay people involved in the project, the editor, and they all very intentionally were sneaking in as much gay subtext as they could. And I was really relieved and thrilled to hear that I wasn't making things up in my head about it or interpreting something that had not been intended. What was fascinating is when I interviewed Leonard Whiting, who played Dr. Frankenstein, he was not aware of any of that. They had not actually discussed it with him openly. And there is very much a gay subtextual relationship between Dr. Frankenstein and his beautiful creature, played by Michael Saracen. And what's unique, when Dr. Frankenstein brings the creature to life, he starts out looking beautiful. And only over time does his skin start to deteriorate and everything goes wrong. And that's part of why the doctor rejects the creature, because this experiment has gone wrong and it's no longer of interest to him anymore. And this abandonment becomes this whole tragic thing. I was really relieved to know that they had intentionally put all this in, and their little secret subversive group, they called themselves the Lavender Hill Mob, which absolutely cracked me up because that is the title of one of my very favorite Ealing British comedy from the 50s with Alec Guinness and everybody. And it was all intentional. So in my magazine for Little Shop of Horrors, which you showed us, it is like a book. First of all, the cover art that Mark Maddox ended up doing was a 3-panel mural that's absolutely incredible. Let's see if we can get it without all the glare.
Yeah.
And it's the largest magazine cover for a horror film magazine ever. There's never been a 3-panel cover of one piece of art. And I happen to have acquired this. So I actually have this actual original art. I mean, it's this humongous painting. We did this exhibit of all the artwork from the magazine at Creature Features in Burbank when that store was open. And it was really amazing to see all the artwork together. And then I got Anne Rice to do the foreword. Very sadly, she just passed away just in the last week or so. Mm-hmm. And this movie also touched her as profoundly as it did me. It actually inspired her to write Interview with the Vampire, which launched her entire writing career. And it was the gay subtext and the whole love story aspects mixed with the horror and everything that really spoke to her and set her on her path. And so she was thrilled to be able to write the foreword for it. And I was so thrilled to give her that platform and do that. And then my article, this massive thing on the making of the film, all the people and directors and everybody they tried to get over various times. I mean, everybody wanted to direct this script, from Francis Ford Coppola to John Boorman to you name it. It was incredible. And the actors that were being considered and actually wanted to be in it, from Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton, and they were the top stars of the day. Marlon Brando. Coppola wanted Marlon Brando to play Dr. Polidori, which ended up being played by James Mason. It's an amazing thing. And by the way, Dr. Polidori, the James Mason part, was directly based on Dr. Pretorius from Bride of Frankenstein. In fact, early drafts of the script for Frankenstein The True Story, that character was called Dr. Pretorius. And the producer really wanted Frankenstein The True Story to be kind of a retelling or a reimagining of the two James Whale classics, Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein, as one magnum opus. And when you think of it in that terms, you can sort of see, oh, okay, that's why we have the creature in the first half coming to life. And then in the second half, we have the blind hermit that he befriends and it turns into a disaster, and the female creatures coming to life. And you really see that a lot of the beats and story points are lifted from those two movies, much more so than the Mary Shelley book. The title that they wrote it under and filmed it under was Dr. Frankenstein. It was NBC, in their infinite non-wisdom, to call it Frankenstein The True Story, which is something they came up with just a few weeks before it aired. And the writers and the producers and everybody were furious about that because it sets up completely wrong expectations. Every single review that's ever been written about the film has to start out saying, well, this is not faithful to the Mary Shelley book. It's implied by the title, and it's just been the bane of my existence because all that negativity, to start out every review in a negative way. Oh, that title, why'd you do it to us?
It doesn't follow the book book, but that's okay.
Exactly. It's its own thing. You know, since when have we talked about a Hammer film, you know, like Frankenstein Must Be Destroyed or something, which is so great, and talked about how, it didn't follow the book. Yeah. So I haven't let you guys get a word in edgewise. I told you, I warned you.
Oh, this is actually great because we do a compression edit on this where we take out a lot of dead air where people are kind of yammering and then take these long breaks. I don't think I'm going to have to edit a single second.
Nope.
Well, see, this is the great thing about the Freak Out. I saw this when I was a kid. It was rerun, and I didn't think much of it. I was 5 when I saw it, and I thought, I wanted an ugly-looking monster, and I didn't get it. So over the years, I just really didn't care for it. And then Gina was like, well, this is going to happen, so give it another chance. And the Blu-ray came out. I got it. I was surprised. Yeah, I was overwhelmed. It really was. Glad this is happening. Matter of fact, when you were just speaking, ordering the Little Shop of Horrors magazine. So, well, I watched the whole thing, and then I watched it with your commentary and watched all the bonus features. And so I got a question for you. When the Blu-ray was coming out, were you spearheading that, or did your phone ring and they said, hey, we want you?
Well, the Little Shop of Horrors came out in 2017, and I very proudly won the Rondo Award for Best Article of the Year. I'm so super proud of that. And Shout Factory uses Konstantin Nasser quite a bit to do the extras on a lot of their classic horror. One of Konstantin's favorite movies was the Frank Langella Dracula, and Shout Factory did a really lavish 2-disc thing with that, and Konstantin did all the extras for that. They told Konstantin that they were going to be doing Frankenstein The True Story, and Konstantin said, whoa. Konstantin also writes a lot for Little Shop of Horrors, and he had done a whole issue on the Frank Langella Dracula. That's his sort of passion one, and I'm the Frankenstein The True Story guy, so he knew of me, and we know each other. We both live in LA. So he called me up and he said, listen, you know, you're the only guy who can do the audio commentary, and they don't have much of a budget because the film is, you know, 3 hours and 6 minutes. Them doing the restoration, that's like double typical Hammer film running time, and it's eaten up all the budget and eaten up most of the disc space, and they don't really have much money. So, you know, it may just have to be the audio commentary. And I was like, whoa, no, that's not happening. If we're going to have this once in a lifetime opportunity, I don't care. Don't pay me a dime. I'm getting interviews. So I did Jane Seymour for the 3rd time now on camera at her house in Malibu, which is such a sweetheart to let me grill her yet again. And then got Don Bacardi, the co-screenwriter at his studio in Santa Monica. The other one, though, I felt like we just absolutely had to have was Leonard Whiting. And he lives in London. He's Dr. Frankenstein. So I just bit the bullet and got myself over to England. We got all 3 of those interviews and the extras, and then my audio commentary. And that pretty much filled up every single bit of space on that one disc, given the film is so long. So that was about all we could do. I would have liked to have done a few more, you know, special features or whatever, but it would have had to have been a 2-disc thing, and they just didn't have the budget for it. Also, we wanted to keep the price, you know, they wanted to keep the price, you know, reasonable, because the film's kind of been this lost film, and a lot of people have never been exposed to it, don't know much about it, or, you know, whatever. So it's got to be priced reasonably, or people, you know, are not going to buy it. But at any rate, it did come out, and it came out just before the shutdown. It was in March of 2020. So I kind of hope that they sold more than normal, because people needed stuff to watch at home, because people were sitting at home. And again, I won another Rondo Award for Best Audio Commentary of the Year, which was, again, just blew me away. I'm just super proud of this as well.
You should get 2 Rondo Awards for that, for as amazing of a commentary as it is. I've seen hundreds of commentaries, and none of them are near what you put into that. It's amazing.
I used every second of space, just like I am now in the show.
Well, you know, the unique thing about the whole story you just told was that prior to this release, all you could get was a funky little VHS, or after that, they came out with just a rip copy DVD of that old VHS, and it looked terrible. There was no information on there. I imagine a lot of people started watching that and then just turned it off because It just looked awful. It had it had like the TV dimensions on it.
Yeah.
And
well, this is the deal. When the film was first aired on NBC in the US, it was released theatrically in the UK and several other countries, but it wasn't the 3-hour and 6-minute version. It was a truncated 2-hour cut. So literally it's missing a third of the footage. And that's what was released in England and Spain and Mexico and a few other countries. It didn't do well. The reviews were terrible. It just kind of disappeared. Well, in England, there was enough people who were like, but we want to see what the Americans saw. And finally, toward the end of 1975, the BBC aired the whole full 3-hour and 6-minute version. And it rehabilitated its reputation and got really good reviews. So people in England were thrilled about this movie at that time for about 5 minutes. Then when and that's in the 70s. Okay, so home entertainment is just in its infancy toward later in the 70s and in the 80s, and you've got video cassettes. Well, whenever the film was released on video cassette, they couldn't fit a 3-hour and 6-minute on a video cassette, and they put the 2-hour theatrical version, which was crap. So that's what, for the next 20, 30 years, that's the only version that people could actually get. And so many people just thought that's what it is, the official version, which it was not. And the 3-hour version did not get released on DVD until 2006, which, is just crazy amount of time where the film's reputation just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And people just had forgotten about it and didn't pay attention to it or turned it off. I felt like it was my responsibility to rehabilitate this film. I think I helped quite a bit in getting people to pay attention to it and see it the way it was supposed to be seen.
I'd say you would have contributed to that. My first experience actually was seeing it on the original broadcast. I was 7 at the time, probably just a year or so of watching the classics at that point, and immediately was enthralled with Frankenstein and all the Universal monsters. But that came on, and my parents decided to watch it for some reason, because they would never watch anything like that. And I got to see the whole thing and kind of always remembered all of it as this weird, like a fever dream of Frankenstein characters that were nothing like what you had seen before or wouldn't see again for a while. I mean, I hadn't quite seen all the Hammer movies at that point, which it obviously looks a little bit more like that. But I carried this vision of like people getting dumped in acid vat, heads getting ripped off, and all, like this was some crazy stuff that happened on TV.
Yeah.
I would talk about it.
They got away with ripping Jade Seymour's head off at the ball. My God, we kids, everybody I knew talked about that for weeks. It was like the water cooler moment of the century. And it was just crazy, the stuff they got away with. It was at that time, it just literally blew the socks off of everybody. There just had never been anything like that on television.
Well, speaking of which, this is at the time probably, you were saying in your commentary, the most expensive miniseries.
The most expensive television production ever. It was also the most expensive horror movie, theatrical or television, ever for about a month. And then The Exorcist opened in late December, and yes, that was more expensive. But for about a month, it held the title for the most expensive horror film ever made.
Well, I know you covered this in the commentary, but what was the reason that the producer was so adamant about doing TV versus theatrical release?
Well, it was not, the producer actually wanted it to be a theatrical film. Everybody really wanted it theatrical, but Universal was very worried that if it became a theatrical film, that the costs would get out of hand, especially in the hands of directors that would be hard to control. Francis Ford Coppola campaigned to please let me direct this movie, but he was insisting that it be theatrical, and he wanted Marlon Brando, et cetera, et cetera. Well, and this is not Francis Ford Coppola at like a lull in his career. He had just done The Godfather and was at the absolute pinnacle of his career. And this was the film that he wanted to do right after that. Now, his passion for Frankenstein never went away. And many, many years later, he produced Mary Shelley's Frankenstein that Kenneth Branagh ended up directing, which I'm not a big fan of. But he always wanted to do a big, lavish, theatrical Frankenstein with a big cast. And, they got Robert De Niro to play the monster. So, that's what Coppola had in his brain. But Universal was like, Coppola, we can't say no to him on the set about anything. He's just done The Godfather. And with The Godfather, he had gone $1 million over budget. And they said, this could be so out of hand, it's just going to completely blow all the potential profits. And no, we're not going to go in that direction. And then John Boorman, who was coming off of The Deliverance, which was a huge film of his career and nominated for Oscars and for him for Best Director and Best Picture and all this stuff. He wanted to do it with Jon Voight playing Dr. Frankenstein, and he was the star of Deliverance, and possibly as the monster, Warren Beatty, and he wanted Julie Christie to play the female creature. I mean, he had very grandiose ideas as well, and he wrote this impassioned letter to Lew Wasserman, who was head of Universal, begging them to let him do it as a theatrical film. And for the same reasons, they just said no. And at that time, Sid Sheinberg, the Universal executive who famously sort of championed the young Steven Spielberg and is credited with, discovering him and giving him all of his early breaks. He was at that time head of television production, and he kept insisting to his boss, Lew Wasserman, the only way we're going to be able to make sure that this is successful is to keep the budget realistic. It's still going to have to be very expensive, and it's still the most expensive TV film ever, to keep it in the television division. And NBC is willing to pay us enough to make our money back and then some. And this is what we got to do. And he just kept insisting. And that's the direction that it went. Now, the director that they ended up hiring was Jack Smite, who was on contract as a director for television in those days. And he was reliable. He brought things in on schedule and on budget. He had just worked in England. He had directed an episode of Banachek that had guest star Fiona Lewis, so he had some experience of going over to England and working there. So they wanted a guy that they could trust. But also, Jack Smite had had a career in feature films and had done a lot of impressive movies like Harper, Paul Newman, and No Way to Treat a Lady with Rod Steiger, The Illustrated Man, also with Rod Steiger, based on the Ray Bradbury story. And so he had a legitimate feature film background. And so that gave them the confidence that he was going to be able to do this in a classy way that they wanted it done, and to have this big all-star cast and have the actors respect the director and all that kind of stuff. If it had been just a guy from TV, it might not have had that kind of clout and sway with the actors. So that's how it all kind of came together. But Hans Stromberg Jr., the producer of this, it's really kind of his film. He is the son being around the studio, seeing all these great films being made, getting to know Karloff when he was just a kid, and Karloff was a family friend, and getting to go over from MGM to Universal and visit them making The Bride of Frankenstein. He already met Kenneth Strickfaden, who had done all the electrical equipment in the original Frankenstein, but he met him on his dad's movie, Mask of Fu Manchu, because he did all the electrical equipment in that. So he knew him, he knew Karloff. And by the way, Elsa Lanchester was shooting a Hans Stromberg movie at MGM at the same time she was doing Bride of Frankenstein. So one day she'd be at MGM, the next she'd be at Universal, and vice versa. And so Hans Stromberg Jr., at about the age of 10 or so, was at Universal watching them make Bride of Frankenstein and getting to know Elsa Lanchester. He already knew Karloff, he already knew Strickfaden. He was a monster kid like us. He absolutely fell in love with those movies, and his whole dream in life was to make this incredible opus. As he grew up, he didn't get along great with his dad, partly because he was gay and wasn't really accepted by his father for that, deciding, to get into television. And he got a job as head of programming for the local ABC affiliate here in Los Angeles. And he was there on the job for about 3 or 4 weeks. And he went to this Halloween party, and he saw this mysterious woman there, and his brain started to churn. returned. And she ended up winning at this Halloween thing. She won best costume or whatever. And her name was Mila Nurmi, or however you pronounce it. And he tracked her down, and she wanted to do this weird character, which had not been named at that time. She admits inspired by the Morticia Addams character in the Charles Addams drawings of those cartoons that were in the New Yorker. So Hunt Stromberg Jr., so when he set up a meeting with her, and she said, I want to do a TV show that's based on the Charles Addams character. And he was like, well, no, we don't have the budget for that. We're just this little local TV station. No. What I have in mind is something completely different. We have all these horror films that we show late at night that do terrible in the ratings, and they're terrible movies. I have this idea that if we had a host, it could maybe get a little more viewership and we can have a little more fun with this. And he literally came up with the very first horror host idea, wrote the show for her. So that's what became the Vampira Show in 1954. Mila Nurmi got nominated for a local Emmy Award. I mean, it turned into this humongous hit, huge ratings, then started getting national coverage. There was all this stuff that just was unbelievable for a little tiny local show. And then she started getting booked as a guest on big variety shows like Milton Berle and different shows like that. And it just exploded. And as a result, Hunt Stromberg Jr. suddenly was the wonderkind of television. And CBS sat up and took notice. Within about 3 or 4 years, he became head of programming for CBS, the whole network. Hunt Stromberg Jr. was the guy behind championing and developing and getting on the air such hit series as The Munsters, My Favorite Martian, The Beverly Hillbillies, Gilligan's Island, Twilight Zone, Alfred Hitchcock Presents, and Wild Wild West. It was like every iconic show that guys my age it changed our lives, everything. I mean, you just could do no wrong. After that, he became an independent producer, and he wanted to do what became Frankenstein The True Story. He wanted it called Dr. Frankenstein, but he convinced Universal to let him do these big budget remakes of all the classic horror, and he was going to do them all. After Frankenstein The True Story was successful, then he spent the next several years working on Universal's remake of King Kong. Right. The Legend of King Kong, which was not the one that ended up getting made. And it was just a big, horrible mess. Had Hunt been able to continue, and if that had been the King Kong that had actually come to fruition, then I think he would have continued to do more and more of these big, lavish horror remakes. But the King Kong thing pretty much killed him. The Frankenstein movie was his baby in every way, shape, or form. And he was there on set every second. And there was a director, but Hunt was standing right next to him for every single decision and every single thing all the way down the line.
I have to admit that as the years went by and I hadn't seen it in so long, I kind of forgotten the impact that it had, and then didn't really get the full impact until the Blu-ray, which it's just shocking that they could take the source material that apparently what they had left and then come out with that. And of course, all the stuff you added to that. It's an unreal release, definitely.
It really is. And the restoration just looks so beautiful. And it's never looked so good, because it didn't look that good when it aired on NBC, because the resolution back then was nowhere near what it can be now. The movie was shot on 35 millimeter. It's absolutely gorgeous. You really do see it in all its splendor for the first time on this Blu-ray.
What I've really liked about it is I've always wondered, Frankenstein's monster, that's made from dead tissue. Sooner or later, it's going to rot.
Yeah.
You never address that until finally, okay, this makes sense.
Yes.
Also, exactly. There's no electricity then. So how do they harness his power? And I thought the solar power I thought was very interesting.
So, and you were speaking about Vampira earlier. You work with another well-known female horror host.
Yes, I have. I directed Elvira's Haunted Hills, the second Elvira movie that was came out in 2001. And Cassandra Peterson, who's Elvira, is one of my dearest and closest friends for the last 30 years. It's been very, very busy year for her. It's our 20th anniversary of Elvira's Haunted Hills, which came out on Blu-ray in October from Shout Factory with all kinds of great extras. And I helped direct a new introduction for it with her and her Elvira drag. Also, she turned 70 in September. Her memoir came out in October called Yours Cruelly, Elvira. And she came out and has had a girlfriend for the last 19 years. And her memoir went to number 4 on the New York Times bestseller list. And I was kidding with her that we already had your tombstone made where it was going to say Cassandra Peterson, aka Elvira. Now we have to scratch out Elvira and put New York Times bestselling author. So it's been just a crazy fall for her with so many things, so many milestones. And it's also the 40th anniversary of the Elvira character, which was invented in 1981. And so it's just been wild. And I've been kind of writing the Elvira's Haunted Hills portion of all of that. And I also, well, this is the Blu-ray that came out in October, and it's got this cool little slip cover. I printed up these custom photo cards. That's me with her on the day we were shooting the little introduction. Look at how amazing she looks.
Oh, yeah.
And we're holding a copy of the Blu-ray. I offer these cards, and I sign them to anybody who wants one for free. You just go on Facebook, private messenger me your address, and I will send you one of those cards, which just so happens to be sized perfectly to fit into your Blu-ray case with those 2 little clips. So
everybody out there knows what to do then.
Yes, the Blu-ray. And then I did a massive interview with her for the Dark Side magazine, the British publication, but it was carried here. All the Barnes and Nobles in the country had this a month ago. May still have copies there. It's just got this huge 15-page spread and a billion pictures. And we talk all about her career, but about half of the interview is on the making of Elvira's Haunted Hills. So yeah, I'm a big part of my life is in the Elvira universe for sure. I'll do one little quick sideline. Vinny, you were probably named after Vincent Price. Is that true? Wow. Were your parents Vincent Price fans?
No, I was supposed to be born May 27th, but I was born May 28th instead. And it was either going to be that or Jason. So,
wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Well, that's fantastic. Yeah. Well, because during the shutdown, Cassandra Peterson, Elvira, got a new dog and she named it after Vincent Price, who was one of her closest friends. And she named it Vinny the Pea or Vinny the Pooh, depending on what she has to clean up on the floor in the morning.
Yeah, I've heard
that's
that.
That's the same as our Vinny. It's the exact same thing.
I've heard that all my life. Vinny the Pooh. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, you're going to hear some more now. I'm hoping we can drag you through the mud for one more feature here. If you're down with it. You remember the old game called Mad Libs?
No.
It's a game for kids where you have a story written out and then you ask a person different word types and they rewrite their own story. Now, I've written a story for you. All you have to do is in turn give us back. But there's about maybe 25 words here that we'll ask you for. And then we can send that off to Jimmy and he'll read your story back to you.
We'll see how it goes.
That's not a ringing endorsement.
Yeah, I know, right?
I will try. You just want to embarrass me. I know. Okay, let's do it.
Oh, God, no.
All right. I need a spooky adjective.
Creepy.
A number, any number.
69.
A male actor.
Henry Cavill.
A noun, person, place, or thing.
Lizard.
A female actor.
Elsa Lanchester.
A beloved keepsake of yours.
A Cat People movie poster.
Another number.
9.
An activity, past tense.
Directed.
Someone famous.
Vincent Price.
Another activity, past tense.
Reanimator. There you go. Or reanimate. Reanimate. Yeah.
All right, an actor, any actor.
Peter Cushing.
Another number.
65.
A creature, some kind of creature.
The Frankenstein creature.
An animal.
Well, a wolf.
A popular female horror host.
Elvira.
An article of clothing.
Oh, Speedo.
Jimmy's wearing his now.
A town or city in Canada.
Toronto.
A lesser known horror actor.
Robert Quarry.
Have we lost Jimmy altogether?
He's back.
There's Jimmy. We got you back.
An ice cream flavor at
Baskin Robbins.
Yeah, Baskin Robbins.
Swiss chocolate almond. It's actually a Haagen-Dazs flavor, but
that works. A Greek god.
Close enough.
A Greek god, I guess. Zeus.
A cigarette brand.
Camel.
A terrible horror movie.
Plan 9 from Outer Space.
The terrible.
We've seen worse.
Yeah, that one's so bad it's great. There's others that are so bad they're just unwatchable.
This plays into that. I need a worse horror movie.
Oh, wow. Dracula versus Frankenstein.
Uh-oh. Cutting us to the heart here.
That's our thing.
We did an interview with Xander Vorkov.
Oh my God.
Yes.
Really?
Yes,
Oh,
we
Great
did.
guy.
It took me 5 years to track him down.
I've heard fandom that he has kind of resurfaced and was about to start going out on the circuit with the conventions when COVID hit. So it hasn't, I don't know that it's happened yet, has it?
He did a little bit of it. He actually consulted with me about some stuff, being somebody who you would never consult with about any of this stuff.
Wow.
But because I'm a fan of his, he came back and asked a bunch of questions about what he should do.
I have a connection to Dracula versus Frankenstein, an obscure one. Okay, I was one of the producers of Gods and Monsters, the incredible Oscar-winning film that Bill Condon directed, starring Ian McKellen as James Whale, the director of Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein. Okay, there is a flashback scene in the movie on the set of my favorite film of all time, Bride of Frankenstein, and it's the laboratory set, and we had to literally recreate the entire lab on a soundstage in LA, and it was one of the most incredible moments of my entire career. We tracked down the original laboratory electrical equipment that Kenneth Strickfaden had designed for Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein, and Mel Brooks had dug it up for Young Frankenstein, but it was also used in Dracula versus Frankenstein, because Forrest J. Ackerman knew where to find it, and Forrest J. Ackerman has a role in it and was, friends with all the people involved and was promoting it all the time in Famous Monsters of Filmland magazine and blah, blah, blah. And so also, I gave you the shortest version I could think of. Before Bizarre magazine, my fanzine, that was kind of professional. My very, very first fanzine was mimeographed, and it was called Pit, named after Pit and the Pendulum. What else? Right. And I interviewed Forrest J. Ackerman for that magazine, and it was just before Dracula versus Frankenstein came out, and he was talking all about it and saying how it was going to be the greatest film that had ever been made and all this stuff. And so I was so built up for that movie that by the time, it actually came out and saw it, I just could not quite live up to the hype.
Well, I think every kid probably had that same experience because of the name of that movie.
Yeah.
Not only it's a Dracula, not only it's a Frankenstein, but it's Dracula versus Frankenstein. It's the only movie named Dracula versus Frankenstein, which for some reason never happened.
Yeah. The expectations were, it could never have lived up to it.
No, it's good stuff. I got a couple more of these and then I'll send the story.
Okay. All right.
A type of business.
Movie theaters, which is what my dad did. My dad owned movie theaters.
That's perfect. Another word for whole.
Hit.
A Hollywood producer.
Hunt Stromberg.
Your favorite shirt, Sam's favorite shirt.
A Ralph Lauren polo.
And by the way, that is an amazing shirt you've got on.
Oh, thank you. As you can see, it's a cross between camouflage and plaid.
An omnipotent being.
Dr. Pretorius.
A color, any color.
Red.
A bad word.
Okay. Pussy. Pussy with a lisp. When I shared a limo with Christopher Lee and Hervé Valleshez, and after spending the day with them on the set of Man with the Golden Gun.
We need an episode on that.
And Hervé was drunk and telling us all the stories about all the prostitutes he'd hired since he'd come to London. And he kept using the word pussy, but every time he said it, it came out pussy. And Christopher Lee and I got so hysterical that we literally could not control our laughter.
Okay, what is Sam's favorite tune?
Ain't No Mountain High Enough by Diana Ross.
An old actor, someone who's been around a while.
Okay, Boris Karloff.
We're winding down here. A number.
13.
A type of jewelry.
A hoop earring.
Something red.
Valentine.
An adjective.
Rosy. I'm thinking red.
I need a number.
32.
And a year in the future.
2049.
I'm going to send this over to James now because he is the official reader of the story.
So do you have any stories of Peter Cushing and Billy Barty together?
I
can think of.
Well, speak into the mic.
Shall I try it? Stop me if I get glitchy.
Your video is very glitchy, but the audio seems to be.
Let's try it, shall we? Sam Irvin rises from the grave one moonless night Sam found himself strolling through a foggy, creepy cemetery. It was 69 o'clock in the morning, far later than any normal person would be wandering about. But since this cemetery was filled with the graves of so many famous Hollywood stars, he thought he would pay his respects. He first visited the grave of Henry Cavill and left a special lizard by the tombstone. The next grave he visited was Elsa Lancaster. Sam spoke softly. Your work meant so much to me. And he adorned their headstone with this cat people poster, which he had since he was a child. As Sam moved on to visit the next one, he was horrified to find a freshly dug open grave with a large headstone that read, "Here lies Sam Irvin." Just then, an ominous figure appeared from the shadows, swinging a heavy shovel. It bumped him hard on the head. A dizzied and concussed Sam gasped and mumbled, "This can't be. I'm only 9 years old, and I still have so many things to do. I've never directed Vincent Price, nor have I reanimated Peter Cushing. Don't you know I've won 65 Rondo Awards?" Sam slipped into the grave and lost consciousness as shovelfuls of earth covered his body. Nobody ever knew what became of Sam. We thought he had fallen asleep and fell into a pit of deadly Frankenstein monsters, or ran across a wild wolf in the forest, lamented Elvira. We've missed him dearly, and we swear to find him and bring him home. The entire Monster Kid community was distraught. They held an annual remembrance of Sam on his birthday. They would all light candles and place around his cherished leather Speedo and his prized autographic photo of Sam with Michael Sarrazin hanging out in Toronto, sharing a towering brick of poutine. Everybody would attend. Everybody, that is, sans one conspicuous name. Robert Quarry never showed up, and Elvira found this very suspicious. So suspicious that she decided to follow Quarry to see just what he was up to. They didn't have to wait long. The very next night, our shadowy suspect snuck out to the old spooky cemetery and went straight to Sam's grave, whose headstone now strangely read, "Here lies Swiss chocolate almond Zeus." Quarry took a long draw on his camel and muttered, "You got what you deserved, Irvin. I should have been the one to win all those Rondo Awards, not you. You never recommended me for a role or mentioned my amazing work in Plan 9 from Outer Space or Dracula versus Frankenstein in any of your articles in the little movie theater of horrors. I hope you enjoy eternity in this old pit." Elvira waited, hiding behind the grave of Hunt Stromberg until Quarry was gone, then proceeded to unearth the casket that contained Sam's lifeless body. Since Robert Quarry was kind of lazy, he didn't bury Sam very deep. It took but a few minutes to get the casket open. Once unsealed, it was clear that Sam still looked pretty good. After all, he was wearing his tightest camouflage trousers and his Ralph Lauren polo. Elvira looked to the dark night sky and shouted, "Oh dear Dr. Pretorius, please grant us a way to bring Sam back to us." Just then, she remembered she had just been given the cell numbers of David McCallum and Leonard Whiting, who upon calling agreed to use their combined remembered powers of reanimation to bring Sam back to the living. They quickly reassembled their laboratory and focused the red ray, the ultra-red ray of the sun onto the massive reflective light amplifier. After a few explosions, flashes, and puffs of smoke, Sam's mostly naked but strategically bandaged body sat up and spoke. "Holy puffy, McCallum. Fire up ain't no mountain high enough. Let's go crash a party or two." Fortunately, just down the road, Jane Seymour was hosting a celebratory gala. It was a red carpet affair, and everyone was donning high fashion attire. Everyone, that is, except Jimmy's mom, who was already topless and swinging her Joan Mustang tramp stamp and getting busy behind the bar with Boris Karloff. Jane Seymour was triumphantly announcing the 13th sale of her open heart's hoop earring when Sam arrived, still dressed like a Chippendale's mummy. He was so jazzed that he went to give her a big congratulatory kiss and accidentally pulled her head clean off her shoulders. Blood flowed onto the floor like a river of Valentines. Elvira and Leonard looked at each other and quickly made for the exits. But McCallum stayed behind to adore his creation. "Sam, my lovely Sam," he started. "I will never..." Just then he noticed a pair of big rosy pimples behind Sam's left ear. Jumped up and shouted, "How far is it to the cliffs of Dover?" Realizing he was on the wrong continent, McCallum got into his car, drove straight home, and dove into a big vat of acid he had kept in the garage since the early 70s. Sam Ubered home, put some Clearasil on his pimples, enjoyed a wheatgrass smoothie, and spit-shined all 32 of his Rondo Awards daily until the sun went supernova in the year 2049. Thank the heavens for Sam Irvin!
Oh boy, that was painful.
Why'd you put my mom in there again?
Your mom's always in there.
No.
Always with my mom.
Yeah, no, Karloff's pretty awesome. So
That was insane. I loved that. That turned out way better than I expected.
well, real quick, are we gonna have a Jimmy's Cruddy Cuisine this week or next week or anyway?
I don't know. I know commitments. It's Christmas week. I'm a mess right now. There will be a video of some sort. I haven't decided yet if I'm going to make some food or if I'm going to do another TikTok because I really like TikTok.
Your fan viewership is wondering what's going to happen. I saw a Facebook post with a bunch of cookies, and I can't believe I don't have some.
Yeah, I made 300 cookies yesterday.
And where are they?
Oh my God. Holy crap.
Where's my cookies?
They're coming. Don't worry.
Okay. What about Vinny's Monster Minute? We had one of those this week.
Let's go to the clip. Well, hey, folks. I got nothing this week. Nothing. Sorry. It's been crazy. Still working overtime. No time for music. No time for projects, etc. And my brain is fried. So sorry. Got nothing for Monster Minute this week. So I'm the one with the busted egg. Ow! Shit.
Son of a bitch! God damn it, all the help! All this super fun! God damn it! Son of a bitch!
Hey there, everybody. This week's earworm is the song Riff Raff by AC/DC in celebration of the great Saint Malcolm Young, whose birthday would have been today, January 6th. So as usual, I'll post a link in the comments. Cheers.
Well, I already promoted a bunch of stuff. During COVID, I wrote a parody of a little golden book, those little, books that we read as kids.
Yeah.
It's called Sam's Toilet Paper Caper. And it's all about me trying to find toilet paper during the toilet paper shortage at the beginning of the pandemic. And it's illustrated like a little golden book. And we have all kinds of movie references and silliness, like the grocery store clerk. It's all done like film noir.
Oh,
There's
cool.
Peter Lorre. There's a Carrie homage and Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, Sound of Music, Julie Newmar. It's crammed into this book. It's $10. You can get it on Amazon, and all the profits go to the World Health Organization COVID-19 Solidarity Response Fund. So
Awesome.
check that out. It's a great stocking stuffer, and it's for a good cause. So anyway, I had so much fun doing that.
Awesome.
That's very cool.
That's awesome.
You definitely told us some of the most in-depth, cohesive tales of stuff that we asked for. It's been super awesome to catch up with you and find out all this cool stuff.
Really
I don't know
fun.
about these guys, but I hope we can talk to you again someday in the near.
I would love it anytime.
Yes.
We're just
Fantastic.
scratching the surface here.
All right, weirdos. That's it for this edition of Livin' Cruddy. I want to thank, as always, our glorious host, Mr. Gino Royd, the fantastic Vinny Scrams, and for all of his time and generosity tonight, thank you so much, Mr. Sam Irvin. It was a pleasure to talk to you.
Loved it. Thanks for having me, guys.
Great show.
Really, really, really fun. Look forward to the next. Pussy with a lisp. When I shared a limo with Christopher Lee and Hervé Valleshez, and
Wait a minute.
Hervé was drunk and telling us all the stories about all the prostitutes he'd hired. He kept using the word pussy, but every time he said it, it came out pussy. And Christopher Lee and I got so hysterical that we literally could not control our laughter.
For a second now, bounce to this. Laid back.
With my